live? Yes, now we're live. Cool.
Mhm.
So Adam usually is running the meeting totally, but he's traveling today. Might be able to join in a bit, but he asked Manil and I to help drive it for now. So we gonna get things kicked off. Let me pull up the agenda here. I think I have it. Okay, cool. So agenda items. First, does anyone want to take minutes?
I'm pulling open the doc. I can drop stuff into there while we speak.
Cool. Sounds good. Awesome. So agenda items. We have 3 agenda items right now, so let's dig into that. Issue 147 in Node.js website redesign, new home, Node.js.dev. In this issue, Adam says we're currently split between 2 repos. It makes sense to consolidate. The website redesign group is currently owning Node development of Node.js.dev. Simplicity's sake, we may want to move the governance documents, meeting minutes, admin issues, and etc. over to Node.js.dev and have a single source of truth. I also see the value in keeping admin only repo alive. However, I wanted to breach conversation. Yeah, so Manil, you have a comment there. I tend to agree with that. Just especially since Node.js.dev will eventually get merged into Node.js.org, or like there's going to be renaming happening again there. I think it makes more sense for us. I personally think it makes more sense for us to keep them separate. Just because like it's cleaner, I guess. It's my perception, but I'd love to know what other people's thoughts are.
I'm sort of new to website redesign, so my first question is, and y'all probably know, what would long-term ownership be for each site? Who owns what?
So I think yeah, it's a good question. Node.js.org, so Node.js.dev right now is basically where we're developing the new website. So we started with the guide kind of launch of Node.js.dev, and we're slowly iterating on that to make it into the new website, kind of hopefully aligning with the mockups that we have already, and the kind of guidelines we have already. But eventually that is going to end up as Node.js.org. Now there's some interesting stuff there around like, well, there's the website working group. How do we figure that stuff out? And so that's going to be some governance discussion that we're eventually going to have. I honestly don't think it'll be very contentious. Like Frederick has been managing the website basically single-handedly for like 3 years now. So, working with him and making sure that we're actually lowering the barrier for him and also just doing the things we need to have the website up. I don't think that'll be very contentious. So it will eventually merge. That said, we'll still have the Node.js.dev domain. So that's like will eventually like be the same content. So we'll probably want to figure out a different use for it at that point. I have thoughts that I talked about in the ComCon meeting, but panelist. Yeah.
Actually, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No.
I mean, I'm just sort of off the cuff here, but the first thing that comes to mind being a .dev TLD is that it would be a cool place to sort of consolidate public-facing resources for how to develop Node.js versus like making sure that everybody goes to our repositories and whatnot. It might be a cool way to like make that super exciting and clean and great looking for the public up front over time. It's just an idea.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think if we are going to keep the Node.js.dev domain And if it is not going to become one, the go-to website for the Node.js, the new website, then it makes a lot of sense to keep the website redesign and the Node.js repositories, separate. But as Adam said, I would, like to reinforce that we should probably, connect the two so people could know that this is where the meetings are happening and all that admin stuff. So we could have, more participants here in the meetings. Otherwise, if we are moving towards the direction where, we are going to have the Node.js dev as our primary domain, I'm not so sure if that is the direction, then it would make sense to, maybe consolidate the two.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I think the plan, and I guess this isn't solid, but I'm pretty sure the plan is to continue using Node.js.org and use Node.js.dev as like the temporary home for development. And then like once that's consolidated and like we launch the new website, at that point, Node.js.dev will be like, cool, what do we do with it now? I have an idea that I'd be interested to see implemented, but we can talk about that as a later agenda item because I didn't create an issue. So yeah, I think that I guess is there a general one thing I do think we should say is like if we don't consolidate them, what is the alternative? And I think very much to your point, Ahmad, having like here are the repos we use in the Node.js website redesign initiative, and here are and then also add that to the README, and then also link back to the website redesign initiative from the README of Node.js.dev and any other repos that we're working with currently.
That sounds pretty good. It sounds like we can put it right at the top in case people just don't want to read the whole README.
Yeah.
Like right under the heading, and do the same thing on the other side.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. Do you want to add that to the issue, Manil?
Yeah, I will just do that.
Cool.
I'll make it to the
Also, I'm here in the interest of syncing more and coming more regularly to sync with internationalizing things. And so it would be good to keep in touch with the internationalization team over time so that we know, like what the distinctions are and what we need to target, and share through our internationalization platform, which is Crowdin and things like that. So I'm definitely interested to know what the distinctions are and how to begin to work with those.
Awesome. Cool. Do we have anything else we want to say on the new home Node.js.dev issue? Cool.
I added that issue proposal of mine because of the section navigation I added in the agenda list, but somehow it didn't get actualized. Do we want to mention this? I mean, maybe we should get a couple of more people to discuss about it.
In that issue?
Yeah, that's Node.js dev issue 169.
Sorry, where did you put it?
It's Node.js dev.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, so the thing here, Node.js.
I mean, we can also keep this issue, and well, just we will see then what kind of navigations we will need and what kind of structure we will need, and then we can maybe reconsider it.
Okay.
I mean, but if you have any thoughts, I can also try to, I don't know, put them in or just, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, sorry, I was just trying to pull it up. Yeah, so that's my bad. I didn't go through and pull those issues in. We can go ahead and add that to the agenda as well. I will add that at the bottom there in the minutes doc for you. Yeah, so the reason it didn't get in there is because the doesn't, it like generates the list, the agenda once, and then and then doesn't do it beyond that. Like it doesn't update if there's more added, so we have to go add things manually when we do that.
I see.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I went ahead and added that into it. Yeah, it's a pretty simple tool that creates the agendas. Okay, so cool. I added that to the bottom.
Cool.
So we will get to that for sure. Cool. Okay. So let's go on to issue 61, user feedback, Node.js docs survey. This is an issue I created a while ago. I think there's been some progress on it. I haven't been able to kind of attend to it, but it does, well, yes, it looks like there's been some progress. Okay. So it looks like there was an update since the last website redesign issue or meeting. Gary met with the user feedback group, and they're currently a little bit understaffed and can't move forward with creating and updating surveys. They do plan on continuing to have the in-person meetups that help facilitate kind of the in-person meeting. So the actionable thing here that Aguirre suggested was creating a slide deck with some specific areas that we'd like to cover. So does anyone want to try to take that on, or is that something we'd prefer to put on the back burner for now?
I'm wondering, there is a thing, I think a separate initiative where people want to run local, I forget what it's called, but I think Tracy opened an issue around running local initiatives, and a bunch of meetups raised their hand about being willing to host them. Can anyone recall where that would be? I believe it might be in ComCom. I'm gonna go look for that issue.
The outreach program?
I don't think it's outreach program.
Yeah, I don't think it's outreach. If you're talking about the outreach repo, I think that's separate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not seeing it in the ComCom repo. It might have been, was it Tracy Lee or Tracy Hines?
Tracy Lee.
Okay, so that might be absent then.
February 4th. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't recall it off the top of my head. It's that just seemed like, if that is a line, that seemed like the best possible use of our time, is that we merge it with that, because some meetups are already willing to host, but their goals might have been slightly different. Can we circle back around to this later in the meeting? I will try and find that issue.
Yeah, sure. Cool. So okay, we'll circle back to that. So we'll move on from to the next agenda item for now. Cool. Node.js /nodejs.dev. First agenda item there is, how do we want to add new members? This is from Miles Borens. We now have a Node.js.dev team for maintaining the site commitment. Started off with a team of 13 people, current mix of Node members and new faces. How do we go about, handing out more commit bits? And then there's been a bit of discussion. Anyone want to talk to this specifically? I see Ahmad, you've been involved in the discussion a bit.
I think we can have, we sort of have an agreement here about, so sort of setting a minimum, let's say 3 PR for documentation or for code to, show that you're interested. and then later on, deferring to the voting process. Like if no one has an objection, then moving on with adding the team member there.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good to me, at least. Anyone else have thoughts or objections? Sorry, go ahead.
But maybe, don't, I think having less specifics here would be more welcoming to the community. For example, not writing that you have to, commit for 3 times or whatnot. Having a general criteria would, be more welcoming and inclusive, I think.
Yeah. I generally try to go down the route of like either, so when I joined the website redesign, that's how website working group, that's how I got involved with Node. I did a bunch of small changes that were like not super impactful, but I was just added as a collaborator. Because I think you can do both like one major change that's dramatically impactful, or a bunch of tiny changes that are like reducing death by 1,000 cuts. So I agree with I definitely agree with you that like having that hard limit doesn't necessarily solve every case of some wanting to bring someone in. Do we want to go down the path of either self-nomination or current member nomination, like having both, asking to be added, or self-nominate, so like self-nominating and asking to be added to the group, or being nominated by someone who's currently a member, and having both of those as an option simultaneously? And then you can still do that, voting, basically consensus seeking process that we use in Node, where you're gonna accept someone if there's no objections, then you can get that through. Does that sound good-ish?
I think the process of self-nominating is sort of a good one. It actually inspires other people to, contribute more, as well as if we can have sort of a general guideline around, maybe you have to contribute a little bit, and then you can go ahead and self-nominate yourself and let the team decide on it. Then it sort of gives them, the ability to show off what they have done, what they have contributed, instead of us or the members already trying to judge on basis of what they have done. And the other way around it is, if someone is already contributing and not trying self-nominating themselves, then we can just go ahead and ask and whatnot.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
I mean, without self-nominating, I think it will be a bit elitist, don't you think so? I mean, of course, you're looking forward for people, but people, I mean, if you need someone to nominate you, it doesn't fit into this community feeling, in my opinion.
Okay, I definitely see where you're coming from. Do you have a different or alternative suggestion that we could consider?
Go again?
Do you have like an alternative suggestion of like how we could approach this? Like, would you suggest having a certain number of PRs or commits or something like that?
Yeah, like, I mean, like Ahmed said, I totally agree with him actually on this point. That's actually, I mean, this is actually a leftover from last meeting. I don't know, in the meeting documents from the last time, it should be something written. I guess Adam wrote down.
Gotcha.
Things.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. I will. If there was a decision last time, I just thought that we'll talk about it in this meeting. I didn't see the 14 days ago. So yeah, if that was discussed in the last meeting, cool. We can probably remove the agenda item. Does that sound good? Take the silence as a yes. Cool. So I've gone ahead and removed the label since it was discussed in the last meeting, and I will add a comment there. So I added a comment there after removing the label. So hopefully we can get that documented. Cool. Anything else on that specific issue about how do we want to add new members? Cool. Awesome. Final issue that's on the agenda. Issue 169. I will open that up. So do you want to talk about this? Laruna, do you want to give us a little bit of an overview of this issue since you created it?
About what issue again?
169.
115.
169.
160.
Navigation.
Yeah.
Navigation proposal.
Well, let me get into it. It was last week. I already forgot about it. Well, yes. I mean, the issue is right now with the method we generate or navigation. It is that we just sort alphabetically the file name. And if you want to add somewhere in between a new document, then well, you need to move all the another documents rename. So that's a bit not comfortable. And another thing is also, if you go ahead and someday say, okay, we need a link there to, I don't know, to Node.js org, then we can't do that with the logic we have right now. So my idea was that we map all the slugs and titles into YAML structure and parse them. But that way we would solve the issue that we can sort them however we want to. We can add them in the middle of list something, and also add links. And we can also go ahead and introduce, well, a couple of levels. Let's say, I mean, right now with the logic we use, we can't even do a second or third dimension of the menu items.
Yeah.
So I went ahead and took a look at a couple of documentation and different sites which are huge, like for example Gatsby.js, and I think one of them was around Mozilla MDN docs. And there's a sort of a general trend here where I would agree with him, with you on having a more control by writing this sort of menu structure manually. Earlier, I was thinking that we should probably keep automatically generating it, but it makes sense to not go around with that priority thing and move around with the manual thing. But one thing I did saw, and I have personally experienced, is that this YAML file always ends up being a big trouble because of one would add one less space, and then everyone is finding that one thing. So maybe we can have a bit more of a strict structure around it, a JSON file, or maybe a JavaScript project if that goes well. But definitely moving into that this direction with a better format would be a go for me.
Yeah, but you just need to be aware of, I mean, YAML files are data serialization, and well, JSON will be just object notation, so we are not as flexible as YAML file. Though the question is, do we want to have that flexibility? I don't know yet. It's just I was more future oriented. Like it can come whatever it wants to. We could hit with YAML files, but with object notation, I don't know. It might be that we need to change it. So it was just proposal to, well, kick out this discussion. We can definitely consider JSON as well.
Yeah, I would say that JSON is quite language agnostic. If you want to go there, then you can always sort of add comments in form of JSON entries if you want to make it a little bit more flexible. But that's about it.
So the thing I would say here is it would be really nice if we didn't have to I guess one of the things that I try to do is reduce the maintenance burden at all costs. And so like not having to do something manually is good. In my previous role, we had to maintain basically the same sidebar very manually via a very old Node.js static site generator. And like that was a real big pain, 5 years in, or 4 years in. But yeah, so it'd be cool if we could reduce the maintenance burden of that and like not necessarily do it manually. So like I definitely agree that in being able to insert certain links or things that aren't part of the actual structure of the document would be useful. And I'm curious if there's a way to do that automatically without having to do it manually. And I don't know if there is or not, but it would be, I don't think anyone will have question us if we try to like automate things and reduce the number of files that we have to maintain manually. So yeah, that's just something that like I always try to be cognizant of. And it's okay to maintain things manually, but yeah.
I'm glad that this discussion was started, so thank you for opening the issue, Larana. I noticed that the main problem here seems to be if you're adding a new article, you have this massive problem of renaming a bunch of files or directories, and it seems like one big issue with maintaining the YAML file is the possibility of making mistakes. I'm wondering if that is like maintaining the YAML file can be less tedious or less prone to mistakes by our review process. So if someone actually does make a mistake, the review process will actually catch it because we do leave issues open for PRs open for at least 72 hours and a bunch of eyes tend to get on it. Also, editing YAML files might be a very low barrier for entry for people who want to get started on this project. So as opposed to it seems to me that editing a YAML file might not be too far off from editing a documentation typo, which typically tends to be how people get started in projects like this. So maybe having that, well, quote unquote, tedious or possibly like time intensive work might be good for people to get their feet wet.
I tend to think that YAML files often lead to many issues because of the sort of flexible formatting they have. But if we want to move towards having to automate it, there's definitely we can for example we can introduce two factors. One early on, a priority factor that you could have. We could just use GraphQL to generate this documentation navigation like we are doing right now based on that particular priority, the way that we have. And later on, if we want to add different links which are not part of this particular documentation or something else, we could introduce sort of a file that has no sort of another let's say parameter that is published none, but it has a priority of that it can be in the menu, sort of an external link. It will save us from having to manually maintain the entire navigation, and rearranging would not be hard because we could just for example, if you want to go between 4 and 5, you could just add another document with 4.5 priority.
That was exactly actually the point why I suggest that, because as you also mentioned, for everything more or less we need to introduce something or touch the code. And since if we have once the logic implemented in our components, we don't need to touch the code at all, actually. It doesn't matter whatever we want to do with the navigation. You can introduce easily more dimensions and you can, I don't know, link to another web page or whatever. That was actually my point why I wanted to go to YAML or just maintain them manually. Of course, it brings the overhead, as I mentioned at the end of the document, that someone needs to write them. It is just like that. I don't know. I don't think so that, I mean, well, to do it automatically will be, of course, really lovely. I mean, if you don't need to touch nothing, it's just a dream, but of course has the issue or just the downside that we are not that flexible.
Can you reiterate on how automating it through Gatsby GraphQL would not be effective? You know, I'm trying to understand what's the issue there.
I didn't get you. Come again?
Can you reiterate on how having to automate it through Gatsby and GraphQL via, you know, the post method, why would that not be effective, or how come it would be less of a thing than as compared to writing that YAML file manually? Where would it break?
Well, honestly, I don't know how that concept looks like, so I can't really say something about it.
I mean, so I think what Lorena was getting at is like, it's nice to automate it, but there's like certain things that if you're doing it in that manner, you can't necessarily do, or at least as far as I know, as far as I understand about GraphQL and Gatsby, like inserting a arbitrary link there might be difficult. I could be wrong. Like I'm not necessarily certain, but
you can actually build, you can actually grow or that post meta to have another, because I have a project where multiple links, you know, are redirected to one single document. So what we have is a bunch of different slugs that are only related to that document. So in a similar way, what we have is a display none property for in the you know, a post meta, where we would just want to add an external link, but it has a display none. It is not a document, and in GraphQL query we can easily, you know, filter it out, where in a post meta or a document where display none does not get displayed, but its slug or its menu item could be inside the navigation. So that is how we do it. But at the end of the day, everything is automated and has priority, so we can easily move, you know, the navigation up and down.
So the thing I'm curious about with that is like, what's the maintenance of that? How do you actually define those, you know, the links or the things that would be not displayed?
For example, there's this entire documentation, which is entire local, but now there's a link towards your social media, and you don't want to publish a document on that. So there's this just one, you know, post meta display none parameter. And in GraphQL, we have filtered out that parameter when we are printing the documentation. So nothing happens for that document. And just for adding, because at the end of the day, what happens is the external links are always like 10% of the internal links. So because of only those 10% link, having to manually maintain the entire navigation is a bit much. So what we do is we maintain those 10% external links in sort of documents, sort of like documentation documents, but they have a display none attribute, so they don't get published as documents. Only their parameter for slugs, or in this case, navigation items with title and their, you know, their slug or their URL, that is only taken into our GraphQL to generate the entire navigation. So it's sort of a document, but it does not have an internal document attached to it, though it does render an anchor tag inside the navigation.
So I mean, at this point, for every front meta tag you introduce into your like markdown files, you need to implement the logic for it. And also for every single thing, you need to introduce new tags, which leads to the problem that you need to touch your logic again. Imagine you want to introduce the, I don't know, third dimension of the site navigation. You need to introduce a tag, which calls, I don't know, just third navigation or navigation section or whatever. And then you need to touch your logic, change it, make it compatible with that. And then if you want to introduce, I don't know, a couple months later, I don't know, a fourth dimension, you have to do the same again, which that's the issue we wouldn't have with YAML files if we have once the logic implemented, because the structure doesn't change. But with the front matter tags, you change all the time your structure, which leads to the problem. You need to change all the time your logic. That's what's actually my intentional point what I wanted to avoid.
I can see the both sides of it.
Yeah, I can too. It's an interesting problem. I think we're probably going to just need to pick one. And I don't know which one we should pick.
Honestly, I will just keep everything as it is before we invest time and effort, because we don't know where we're going to land in, I don't know, half year. So I will wait a bit since we got the happy information from Adam today that we can go on with the implementation of one of the pages. I will just wait a bit and see how things will change, and then, well, depending on the situation, we can go for something, or we will maybe just, I don't know, do something completely different. Nobody knows.
Yeah, I agree with that, because the wireframes are still being made, and maybe we could have a general solution for the entire navigation of the site, and then we would have more insight into if we are going to go for level deeps or deep or not. So keeping it right now where it is makes things easier. Not you don't have to you just have to add another document, and it will be automatically included in whatever category you added in, instead of having to worry about, okay, you have to add the link and a slug to a particular YAML file. But maybe just go with the flow right now. I agree with you.
Yeah, I'll support that. Seems like we'll have more information over time, and we can keep this issue open and come land on something when a problem makes the solution more clear.
Cool. Anything else we want to talk about on that? Cool. So we only have 12 minutes left in the meeting. I did bring something up in the ComCom meeting that I failed to create an issue for, even though I said I would, so I apologize for that. But it's something I think that would be interesting to discuss now, since we were here. Basically, in the ComCom meeting, I began to propose an idea of how we could possibly use the node.js.dev domain after we've transferred the site back to node.js.org. So the site that's in development now, once that's on node.js.org, one use of it could possibly be opening it up a bit. So back in the day, like 2012, I think, or actually before 2012, I think 2011, 2010, Joyent, who used to own Node, had a domain called no.de. So it was a really short domain, and they gave out subdomains to people who wanted to have a subdomain on that. One thing I think that we could possibly do with the node.dev website, or sorry, node.js.dev, node.dev is in ours, with the node.js.dev website is give out subdomains as long as they conform to our code of conduct, or a code of conduct that we would enforce for that. But also there's an interesting interplay here with Glitch, where if people want to work on the tutorials, they could see it live on the internet. So the tutorials that are being embedded in the site now, they could see it live on the internet at some subdomain on something.node.js.dev. So that's one thing, and then they could also deploy other Glitch apps to that if they wanted. And then also deploy their own stuff to it if they want, or alias their own deployments to it, I guess, would be a better way to put that. So that's something that I think would be an interesting use of that in the long run. I'd love to know what others think.
I think that'd be quite cool if we can provision the resources for it. Like, that would be really rad to have.
Do we?
I was gonna say,
have?
Yeah, like js.org. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Do we have a no.de domain?
No, so that's still Joyent's. We might be able to get that from them. I don't think so though. It redirects to node.js.org right now. So it didn't used to. It used to just die. So they might have just decided to do that.
So if we can, I think making something like js.org where we could, give a subdomain to particular developers would be interesting for no.de domain. But with node.js.dev, I like the idea of having, sort of a pre-configured or something like that, where you could just go and, have sort of a Node.js development platform. But with a little bit more options, you could try different versions of Node.js with a bit more than what just glitch offers, or
Yeah.
having a pre-configured one, maybe. Sort of a Node.js playground.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I will create an issue to kind of discuss the future of Node.js.dev. I'll do that now, or once we're done with the meeting. And I think that's a very good idea as well, as like Node.js.dev/playground/whatever. There's a lot of things you could do with that. It's a good idea, and I like that. Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of things we can and probably should do with that. So I think it's good to get that discussion going now.
It seems like syncing that with really great public-facing resources for people to get started with whatever they want to with Node would be an awesome thing too. So like some kind of landing for people to get into Node.js development, and then on top of that, springing from there into publishing their apps and things. Might be cool
for sure. Like that. Cool. Anything else on that? Cool. With that, I think we can probably end the meeting a few minutes early, unless anyone else has anything they'd like to talk about or share.
Related to the doc survey, issue 61, user feedback.
Yes.
Doc survey. I found the repo. I found the issue that we were talking about. It's in user feedback. It's issue 115, and I believe that was what Aguirre was talking about when he said that they plan creating a user group meetup. So I'll just paste that in here so y'all can have a look at that. Local meetups have volunteered to run Node.js user feedback sessions. What we have with the doc survey is something we can actually provide them early on would provide the meetups, because running the user feedback sessions will be kind of high bandwidth, and we're not sure exactly when they'll be able to do it and if they have an existing schedule. But what they could do, if they're willing to do it, would be to start sending out these user feedback surveys. How we're going to do that, whether they'd be allowed to change it, etc., probably something that would need to be ironed out. But this is probably something we could delegate to them, so they could run both in-person sessions and feedback surveys. And that way our feedback surveys would be a little bit more localized and targeted, and we would have a bunch of different people running it rather than just us pushing it out from this central source. Just a possibility.
Awesome. So is there anything specifically that we can be doing now to help enable this?
We could highlight that we have this on that issue and give that, like, suggest that this be a starting point that the meetups could run with. Let's see if it sticks.
So are you talking about issue 115 and user feedback? Or are you talking about the issue in website redesign?
I'm talking about taking the issue 61 of website redesign and providing that in issue 115 and user feedback.
Cool. Does someone want to take that on?
I can plug it in.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Cool. Anything else we want to talk about? No? I see Ben. Do you want to talk about internationalization at all?
It's mostly no. I mean, I think it might be more worth time just making an issue and discussing at length, like,
Yeah.
the different textual assets and places that we need to. I mean, I think we need to do another sort of big push to get people involved and kind of regroup and regather the internationalization initiative and get people on a regular working group meeting cycle and that sort of thing. So I think it's mostly just like getting us organized and syncing up with this group and making sure that we're moving towards providing internationalized docs, whether it's Markdown or whatnot. I think that's what we need to figure out now.
I think I agree with Ben there. There's a good example of how React is doing it. They have sort of a similar structure to what we have with Node.js.dev, and they just started doing their their documentation internationalization on GitHub. So a good thing to look at, for sort of inspiration and making champions of particular languages and assigning particular documents to particular people. That would make sense, but definitely create an issue for that, and maybe we could discuss it in further meetings as well.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think finding champions for localizations is definitely a good way to go. I've been doing a fair amount of work at Envision, thinking about and trying to create documentation that has no upstream or downstream. And I think we have been on track for that. As far as the last time there was a push in the internationalization repo. So I think like alleviating upstream and downstream and finding champions and getting the word out and doing all that kind of stuff will be great. So excited about that.
Cool. Anything else? It's like the 7th time I've asked, and I like that we keep having other things. So good. Okay, cool. Thanks everyone for coming today. See you again in 2 weeks. I'm going to be trying to make these meetings more often. I know I've been kind of tardy a bit recently, so looking forward to seeing y'all again.
You too, Tierney. Thanks, man. Thank you, Ahmad and Manil and Laruna. Nice to meet you too, Ahmad and Laruna. And we'll, excited to see you more.
Thanks,
nice
everyone.
meeting you all.
Bye. Good meeting.